to my funding institutes, the Delaware Running Research Lab, which really, as those scientists who are in here know, that they do the majority of the work, and I want to thank you for your attention, and hopefully we have a few minutes. We have 5 minutes for questions if you have questions. Yes?
So Irene, thank you for what I think was an extraordinary overview in a biomechanical tour de force about this issue. I want to bring us back and ask us a sort of a correlated but different question, which is, can you sort of summarize for some senses, has there been some work about genomic vulnerability in this population? Who's more likely to get an injury pattern? And then issues regarding that chronic impacts, because we look at it from the neck up, causing a version of chronic inflammation, and inflammation as a potential source of long-term problems in this.
Okay. To answer your first question, I think it's genomic therapy and genomic science is really, it's still in its infancy, and I can tell you that I have not seen any research in the area of predisposition for these overuse types of injuries.
Good.
I've seen some in predisposition for some of the fascial types of injuries. People have a tendency to, so I haven't seen that. Now, in terms of inflammatory response, certainly in the area of bone, there have been some studies that have shown that people do develop this sort of inflammatory response prior to the development of a stress fracture. So, you know, and I don't like this term shin splints, a lot of people like to use that term, but basically when you get that sort of generalized pain in the lower tibia and it's sort of distributed over maybe a large area, 5 centimeters, something like that, it is actually, so from these studies, really an early phase of that continuum to a stress fracture. So I think that does indicate that I think there is an inflammatory response that goes on prior to the development of an injury. That's just in bone. Why you guys are quiet?
I'll go.
Doesn't anyone? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. What have you found to be the most innovative, minimalistic approach for cold weather protection?
So there are lots of them. I think I brought my here. So you guys are probably familiar with the toe shoes, and these work just fine. These are great. It does allow individual movement of the toes. They now have shoes, and I know, is Russ Verna here? So for those of you who get a message from Russ that you're not allowed to wear these shoes to work, maybe he would allow you to wear these. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for him, but you know, you can have a shoe like this. It looks more like a shoe. But basically, I think it doesn't matter. I know people that just go out and buy water shoes. You know how much these cost? $100. That's just amazing. They're a water shoe. So people are making a lot of money on this, obviously. But I do know people that go out and run in running shoes, in water shoes, you know, beach shoes. That basically, I think the important thing is you have something that protects the bottom of your foot. Yes?
What about the development of stress fractures? People who first switch to barefoot running and they have weak feet and they try and do it gradually, but it's still sort of a problem.
That is a really good question, and we still don't know at this point whether people who are in minimal footwear or barefoot get more injuries. There's been some talk about that, and I think we need some very well-controlled studies. However, there's always the risk of getting either a musculoskeletal or a bony injury if you don't do this slow enough, and that, in my opinion, is the reason why people get these injuries. So, for example, I started out with a quarter of a mile, and then I went up to a half a mile, and then I went up to 3/4 mile, and I carried my shoes with me, and I ran the rest of the distance in shoes, and that's how I brought my distance up. The minute I have a pain, and I've had a little tibial pain, and I've had a little top of the foot pain, I take a day off. That's what I do. But you know what? I'm not competing for something, you know, basically I'm running for the pure joy of running, so it's easy for me to do that. But I think that's what you should do if you've got pain. Pain is your body's warning sign. There's nobody that gets a stress fracture, a true stress fracture, and doesn't have a warning sign ahead of time. So they just tend to push through it, and they end up with issues. Yes?
I've seen shoes that have a rounded sole so you can't have a heel strike.
Yes.
It seems to promote a mid-strike.
Yes.
Are those useful?
I'm not a fan of those shoes because I think that they promote an unnatural type of a gait pattern. Clearly you don't get a heel strike, but the type of rollover pattern is not consistent with what you see with running. Running really, in my opinion, it's considered a mass spring. It's modeled as a mass spring type of gait as opposed to an inverted pendulum gait that walking has, which has a rollover. So maybe for walking, unfortunately, and I've done a lot of looking in the literature for studies that have compared these to other shoes. There's just not a lot out there. I can tell you that if anyone wants the word on the toning shoes, how many people have bought the Skechers for bikini season? I wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. It was really that advertising campaign actually came from research that was done in Delaware. I wasn't there. I wasn't the one that did it. It was based on 5 subjects. And it wasn't, unfortunately the researcher didn't really know what was going to be done with that information. So there's a lot that gets put out in advertisement that you have to be a bit weary about. Yes?
So we always tell our patients to replace their running shoes after a given amount of miles. Is this like a bogus recommendation?
Well, certainly the cushioning aspects of a running shoe are going to, they're going to become compromised after 200-300 miles of running, clearly. And if you're depending on that, it could cause a problem, for sure. People who wear these kind of shoes that wear them all the time run 500 miles in them because there's no cushioning in them. And as long as this holds up, these are Vibram soles, which Vibram's been around for a long time. They're an Italian company that makes soles of all kinds of shoes. You've probably seen. You can go many, many, many more miles because you're not dependent on the characteristics of the shoe. You're dependent on your own body and your own leg spring. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it would actually be better to run on a really old shoe.
It might be. Certainly a low-profile shoe, maybe a racing flat, and a lot of people are actually kind of moving from their shoes down to racing flats and kind of doing it that way, bringing it down slowly and weaning off in that way. I think it's important to do a little bit of barefoot running just because you get all the sensory input. It feels really great, and it's amazing to me how if I get a little bit of a discomfort, how I can make such a minor change. I couldn't measure with my my motion analysis lab. I wouldn't be, it's so subtle, and yet it changes what I feel. So, yes.
I was going to ask about, it's kind of similar to that, feeling the ground. I mean, I suppose there are some places that you could run barefoot in, like the road on a nice 60-degree day or 70-degree day, right? To feel what you're running on is really important. It gives you that advantage of feeling and getting feedback from the ground.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I just think, I'm not thinking that everyone's going to go barefoot all of the time, but I try it. Just try it. The weather's starting to get nice. I'm going to take a barefoot run today because for me, my temperature's about 40 degrees. There's a couple of barefooters back there that say 37 is the temperature for them. But, if the ground feels really cold, you don't want to get numb. So I'm surprised I didn't get the question of, do I cut my feet with glass?
Yeah.
I knew someone had, you had it, right? You had it. You just didn't want to ask. I've never cut my foot with glass, ever, ever, ever. And I know many people who never have. And that's because when you're running, you're looking and you're seeing. And so, can it happen? Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it can. I just never have. I've never cut myself. I've never cut my foot. I've blistered my foot from hot pavement. That's the only thing I've done.
How about sand?
How about sand, running on sand? I don't think it's the best surface to run on if you're not going to be running on it all the time. I mean, certainly you want to train your limb compliance for the system that you're going to be running on. So if you're going to be running on pavement, which most barefooters do or minimal footwear people do, then you should be training on that because you've got to train the muscles. I actually was sore in my hips, my knees. It wasn't just my lower leg when I was running in minimal footwear. So it's okay to run in sand. There's nothing wrong with it. You will stiffen your leg. But that's okay because you're adjusting your leg stiffness to the whole system. The other problem with beaches is they tend to be on a slant, so you want to make sure that you go both directions. But I mean, run on all kinds of surfaces. They're all great. Yes.
Have you ever tried the water chase from invisible shoes?
I have not. No, I haven't tried. I had someone who was working on my house who got really, he was like a handyman. He really got into this whole barefoot thing, and so he started making Karachi sandals. And I don't know how good they were. I tried them, and I just didn't like them, but it might just have been the shoes. They wouldn't stay put. Yeah. But I know people that do run in the Harachis, so. I think you can run in anything, as long as you've got something protecting the bottom of your foot when you need it. Question?
No.
Oh. So did it at least open your mind a little bit to the idea that maybe we have too much footwear underneath us?
Orthotics out.